Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Whether you are buying for yourself or your business, here you will find tips, techniques and knowledge to support your journey to buying smart. Interviewing business owners and technical experts to give you information and guidance before parting with your money. Save money, time and get what you want when you want it. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this episode, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Daniel Crick, Partner and Sales Director of Ginger & Sanders, Property Sales and Letting Agency. Buying and selling of property is often one of the biggest decisions of our lives. Preparing your property for sale and selecting the right one to suit your budget can be hard work and full of emotional turmoil. This is when you need the support of an expert to guide and support you through the processes and requirements needed to make a successful transaction and the secure decision, the right decision for your family. In this episode, I'll be exploring with Daniel the challenges facing the residential property market in England, discuss the current sales and purchasing processes, and explore the impact of COVID-19 and Brexit. Now, without further ado, hello, Daniel, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome. Perhaps you could spend a few minutes telling the listeners about yourself and Ginger & Sanders.
So I'm Daniel Crick. I'm the sales director and one of the partners at Ginger & Sanders. So Ginger & Sanders is a local independent agent in Eastbourne. We cover sales, lettings and management. We also have a sister company that is Sanders Property Management that does block management. So that's us. We've been going about 9 years now. The sales side of things, 3 years. That's us. That's us here.
Okay. Obviously, the property market's been rather different, should we say, in the last 12 to 18 months. Are you able to give us an overview of what's happening in the south of England and perhaps broader across the country?
Yeah, I mean, over the last year, as you know, with this pandemic, it really has changed things with the market. But you would expect with the pandemic, with Brexit, that the market would certainly not be as it is at the moment, which is a really good market. You know, anyone that's looking to sell, prices are up on last year, and it's a really good time for anyone to buy now. There's the stamp duty holiday, which is ending, I know, in the end of March, but there is a whisper that they're going to extend that. Hopefully it will do, but I think, as we know with the government, they'll leave it to the last minute to tell us hopefully some good news that it will continue, and maybe form a sort of a second wave.
Okay, so what sort of things have changed? What's the disruption to your industry been like? How's it affected your customers?
Well, I mean, the first sort of lockdown, the first proper lockdown, should I say, that one in March last year, we had to completely close, so we couldn't do anything. They were allowing certain existing sales that were ones that were potentially going to empty properties where there was less risk, less contact. They were allowing to continue to progress through and then exchange. But new business, we weren't able to go and do valuations, do viewings or anything like that and create any new business until we were allowed back, which was in the sort of June time. But they said housing market can open back up. There were stricter guidelines of what we had to do with wearing masks, gloves, shoe coverings, hand sanitizing, the sort of distance, the social distancing 2 meters that we had to do. But since then, it's been, as long as we've been keeping up with those guidance, they have said a virtual viewing where possible. But if you can't do that, then then do a physical viewing. Something that we provide here, we do 360 virtual tours, which almost act like a virtual viewing for someone. They're completely transparent. You can see everywhere in the property, so they are as good as having an actual look around the property without seeing it. But in my experience, and I can imagine with most agents, they wouldn't want to agree a sale to somebody that hasn't physically been in there, because as much as those 360 tours are as realistic as they can be, someone standing in the property and getting that feel is completely different from them looking at it on a video.
Yeah.
But it's,
so,
sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, so there have been perhaps some positive impacts of perhaps having the virus, I hate to say, in the respect that you're looking at new techniques and ways of doing things that perhaps you may not have investigated so early before.
Oh yeah, no, definitely so. With regards to, things like that, the 360 virtual tours, they've been brilliant. It's a new thing that we've actually started to do since the pandemic. So we introduced that with a company where they do us professional photography, these 360 tours and floor plans. And yeah, the feedback from people saying these tours are brilliant, and I think you get a more serious buyer if they're looking at the 360 tours and then wanting to then still arrange a physical viewing after that. A lot of the viewings have then from that turned into offers that have then got a sale. So it's definitely been a positive, despite the pandemic.
Okay. And the subject of Brexit then, how has that disrupted the buying and selling process?
If I'm honest with you, I don't think it really has. I think and not to sound the word, but the harsh on the public. A lot of people I don't think really understand too much with regards to Brexit. It's all a bit of a jumble as to what is actually going on. People still need to live somewhere, so they're still going to buy, they're still going to sell a property. I think as long as you're within England and you're buying and selling, there's not really too much of a change. International buyers, I think that's going to affect things with them getting over here and work and things like that. So for somewhere like a little Eastbourne seaside town, it's not really going to affect too much. The bigger places, i.e. the capital, London, where a lot more international, people are there, I think they're going to be affected. But I don't think there's really been too much at this stage. People were sitting on the fence for the last couple of years and saying, oh, when Brexit happens, the market's going to drop by 30-40% and it's going to be a nightmare. But it hasn't. Year on year, prices still going up, even with this pandemic. We're up 7.5% on last year. And like I say, you would expect with Brexit, with the pandemic, the market to be on its knees, but it really isn't.
Okay. If we think about some buying aspects, I've noticed a change in terminology perhaps being used by some estate agents when they're advertising. We're seeing things like offers in excess of rather than the old term of guide price. What's changing and why?
I think with those, most agents and myself don't tend to like the guide prices or even the offers in excess of to initially start with a new property coming on. They like that traditional. It's, for example, 229,950, and that's it. And you invite offers from that. Often what will happen with guide prices and offers in excess are when a property is reduced. It's almost an easier way for an agent to get a reduction, sort of giving a bit of inside tips here of what we do. But in terms of getting price reductions and things like that, often a vendor is reluctant to reduce their property. So a different way of almost presenting their property, you can then look at it as going, well, why don't we do a guide price? So for example, you take a 229,950, you say to someone, well, rather than then we just bring it down to 219,950, it's then a guide price of 219,950 to 229,950. That vendor's still seeing that 229,950 in their advertisement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Same then with the offers in excess of, so a vendor might say, yeah, but if you put it on the market for 219,950, people are going to then offer me below that. So often an agent again will say to, well, look, if we put it on at 219,950, sorry, but offers in excess of, hopefully then that will push someone to pay above that 219,950. But I often find with guide prices, and you may well agree with me, if you saw a property on at 219,950 to 229,950, what are you going to offer? You're always going to offer at that bottom end of the guide. Same with an offers in excess of. If it's on at offers in excess of 219,950, you're probably at best going to offer £1,000 maybe over that. You're never going to get someone say, oh, well, it's on at 219,950, but offers in excess of, all right, well, I'll give you 10,000 more. It doesn't tend to. The only time those sorts of prices work is if you're really drastically reducing the price down. So if you're selling, so it's a fire sale type offer, and someone just needs it gone, there's certain reasons they just don't want it on and gone, you might then say, well, okay, let's guide it. It should be on at 219,950 to 229,950, but we'll put it up 189,950 to 199,950 because they know it will go. Same with the offers in excess of. If you do the price low enough to start with, of course you're going to get offers over and a lot over. If you had a house that's worth 300 and you put it on for offers in excess of 150, full well people are going to be bidding you way above that. So it's a bit of an agent's trick, the guides, as an easier way really of them reducing the price without really reducing the price, and it makes vendor happy, and you've sort of got that price reduction, because as it presents on the websites, it'll always be at its lowest price. So you do a guide price of 219,950 to 229,950. It will show 219,950 until you click into the property. So it's a bit of an agent's trick, really. But most agents don't like doing it.
Okay. So when seeking a property, what sort of key things would you recommend people consider? How would you suggest they detail their requirements to help the estate agent offer them the most appropriate property choices, particularly if they're not from the local area?
Whenever we get someone register, they'll ring up and they'll say, we're looking to buy a property, we want to register with you. Obviously, we take all of their personal details, and what I then tend to say to someone, rather than saying, how many bedrooms do you want? How many bathrooms do you want? I tend to say to somebody, tell me what you want. Tell me exactly what you're after. And normally from that, then someone will just open up to exactly saying, well, ideally, we're looking for this, and this. Up to this sort of price, and then anything from those things that they ask, I can then ask and elaborate on. For example, are you interested in a property that needs work doing to it? Those types of questions there. Often with someone that's out of area, it's 9 times out of 10 that they'll move to an area because they know somebody in the area, or if they've got family in the area. So it's always that 9 times out of 10, I would have thought they've spoken to family and friends, so they know the areas, they know where's the areas to be, the areas to not necessarily be, and things like that. And doing a lot of online research on new towns and cities and things like that. But for us, as to get exactly what they're after, most agents will say to someone, just tell us exactly what you think you want, and we'll tell you whether that's going to be possible based on, what budget you've got.
Okay. So do you have any top tips and questions that a buyer should think about and ask when reviewing a property, and why should they ask those questions?
I think when they're actually on viewings and looking at properties, often, especially with people that are maybe first-time buyers, they get sort of a bit dazzled by, there's 2 bedrooms, there's a nice looking garden, the kitchen's modern and things like that. But there's often things that I suppose get forgotten about, the things that you're not really, that you don't see on the surface, things like the plumbing side of things, the electrics, roofs, insulation, stuff like that. They're often questions that are always a good question to ask an agent to know, how modern, is that, how old is that boiler? Is it serviced? Because the last thing, especially for a first time buyer, they're not going to want to get into a property. It's been a struggle enough for them to get their deposit together to buy them their first property, to be then 5 minutes into moving in, boiler's knackered, they've got to get a new boiler, or electrics, something's up with the electrics, it needs a whole new circuit board, or things like that, roofs leaking and stuff like that. They tend to be the questions that are always missed, especially with those types of buyers. You're more sort of experienced sort of buyers and sellers, where it's 5th, 6th move for them. They tend to know what they're looking for, but those would be the sort of the questions that I would say would be the ones to really ask. And same with, like with the area, ask, what is the area like? There's a really good website now. Don't ask me exactly what it's called, but there's a really good website there that you can type in a town, a postcode, and it will give you crime rates and things like that. So if especially someone that's maybe moving into a new area they don't know, there's plenty of websites now and helpful tips on those sort of websites for, so you can make the best sort of decision on where to move to.
Okay. So let's say somebody's found the property they want to proceed with. What are the main steps now up to the point when they actually are about to move in?
Blimey, so from somebody saying, yes, I'm interested in buying that property, what we would do as an agent is we would firstly then take all of their details. As most good agents, they'd have most of that anyway, i.e. names, numbers, addresses. But it's then finding out exactly what they've done in regards to their finances. So speaking to a mortgage one of them, speaking to their mortgage advisor, getting an agreement in principle to make sure that they can afford to actually buy the property. If they're a cash buyer, if they've got cash sitting in the bank, we always like to see proof of funds. If it's somebody that's selling a property to buy another property, we then like to speak to their agent, grab the chain details and do that side of things. So that's really what we do initially, to get then all of that together before we would then go to a vendor and present the offer to them. So that's really, that's the sort of first steps. And then after that, once a property is agreed, it's getting their solicitor's details. And then from really after that, it's more in the solicitor's hands. We just, as the agents, are the sort of middlemen to just check in with them, check in with their solicitors on both the sellers and buyers side to progress, see how the progression's going, and then updating everyone through to them actually then moving in.
Okay, but so surveys and things like that's done through the solicitor as opposed to
well, not necessarily through the solicitor. If they're buying with a mortgage, the mortgage advisor, the mortgage company tend to send out a surveyor to make sure that what they're buying, they're not paying more than what it's worth. Cash buyers often get told to instruct an independent surveyor to come around to maybe do either a brief survey, depending on the age of the property. If it's an older style property, maybe going in a bit more in depth, full structural survey. But that's normally down to either the mortgage advisor or the buyer themselves to get that booked in.
Okay, let's flip the coin and look at selling a property.
Yeah.
So when you're going to go in and look at a new property, you need to get an evaluation of its price. How do you go about that? What are the key criteria that you look for to try and set a reasonable market price?
So what we do before we go out, so when somebody rings up and says, hi Dan, I'd like a valuation on my property, first thing I would do is take all of their information of who they are, their address, and then I ask them, a bit like with a buyer on them telling me what they would like, I say to them, tell me about your property, talk me through exactly what you've got there. So then they, again, I shut up, they tell me exactly what they've got, and people love to talk about their property. So they're telling me, I've got a 4-bedroom detached house, I've got a conservatory, I've got this, that and the other. So I take as much information as I can, because what I would then do before even visiting them is I then go on to the property portals, Rightmove, Zoopla, who have on their back end that agents have access to. But I've got really good valuation tools where we then type in their address and it gives us all the different properties that recently have been on the market, that have not necessarily sold, but they've been on and then withdrawn for one reason or another, stuff that's sold. And then it gives you an overview then of what's been on and roughly what the value would be. But you can't just base it on that. You then have to physically visit the property to see exactly what their property is like. So we take all of that information with us. We then have a look around the property, and then we base it on the similar stuff that we've got written down there from previous things, like I say, that have sold and not sold. And from there, you between you and the vendor come up with the best possible price. Always with a vendor, their property is the best one in the road. So you can tell a vendor, well, next door sold for 210, and they'll always go, yeah, but mine's got this, mine's got that. So yeah, 9 times out of 10, their property will be coming on for just that smidgen more normally than their next door neighbour. But that's how we come together with prices. It's really done on comparable evidence of similar stuff, normally within that road or maybe a quarter-mile radius that matches as best as it can to what they've got.
Okay. So what are your personal recommendations for sellers to consider when trying to optimize their property value? What like small things or medium things could they do to help boost the value of their property?
Yeah, see, without them spending too much money, it's often, I find, just the small niggly things that when somebody's looking round, for example, silly things like a kitchen cupboard door is not hanging quite right, or there's a fence panel in the garden that's fallen down or leaning over. Those small things, a wall that's maybe a bit scuffed, or there's been an old leak from a tank in a loft that's stained their ceiling. The leak itself is gone now. That's been fixed, but they've not made good of the ceiling so it's got that staining. Those small little things, just when you've got a buyer going round, in their head are going to be just thinking, well, I've got that I've got to do, I've got that I've got to do, I've got that I've got to fix, I don't like that. That's, and it's all those things that give ammunition to a buyer for when they want to put in their offer. Whereas if I say to a vendor, if you can eradicate those, any excuse for a buyer to, every buyer is going to want to think they've had a bit of a deal and getting some money off, but to eradicate those sorts of things, because although they're small things and they're mini fixes and they're very cheap fixes in the grand scheme of things, they're all things that in a buyer's head, that's 500 quid I want to knock off. That's 500 quid I want to knock off. When they're all things that, that rehanging that kitchen door is just a 2-second job that you can do that's going to cost you nothing bar 2 seconds of your time with the screwdriver. Just those small little things that I think just stops that buyer and gives that vendor that maximum chance of, you don't want faults, that you don't want any purchaser to find any faults, to then why would you want to knock money off? There's nothing wrong with it. That's how I say to people. It's different when you've got a dated kitchen or mold or things like that. Those types of things you're going to have to pay for to get done, or price it according. But those small little things, they're the first impressions. That's what counts. When people walk in and look at your property, you don't want, like I say, those silly little things that you could do that will take 5 minutes or half hour to do, to compromise you getting your best possible price.
That's good. Thank you for that. So let's say I'm just about to sell my property with any luck. I've got somebody coming round. Are there little things you could do to improve the ambiance, shall we say, of your property to make it more attractive? Get that first impression right with the buyer.
There's the things you see when you're watching the property programs on TV, and the coffee's on, the oven's on with someone's baking a cake and that type of stuff. I find all of that's that's for the TV. The real life of it is, you as an agent, the last thing you want to do is open the door. There's loads of shoes just kicked behind the door where you're trampling over things. There's kiddies' toys that are in the middle of the room, because immediately a buyer's eye is drawn to those sort of things. And they're all those sort of negative things that really shouldn't be there. Washing, on a clothes area. It's silly little things. It's nothing major. A bed not made, washing up. It's those things that I know that buyer's not going to be buying that house with that stuff in. But it's just that, you've got to think a buyer's looking around at not just your house. They're looking around at, 5, 10, maybe 15 properties that day. You need, you don't want them to be thinking, oh, that was the one where, oh yeah, there's all them shoes, that were, the minute we walked in, we were having to clamber over stuff. And, there was that, we couldn't really see that room properly because there was all that washing up, hanging on the areas and things like that. So it's small little things, just like with the previous question of how to have something presented before marketing to get your best price. Just those little things. it's not the having a the smell of a coffee or bread and things like that. That's for the TV. But the real life is clutter away, and to be able to make a seamless sort of viewing with someone, to be able to go around and, like I say, not be or can we look in that cupboard? You open it and everything falls on top of you. So it's those sort of small little things that just make the difference when someone's looking around.
Okay. Thinking from an exterior point of view, the term curb appeal comes to mind.
Yeah.
What is that, and how can a seller take advantage of the aspects of that?
Again, when I'm valuing a property, or at that point where I'm taking the property on, I'm always saying to people, the first thing that any purchaser is going to see is obviously the front of your house, because they have to come to the front of your house to see to get to your property. So that's going to be the first thing that people can be completely put off by a property without even going in by how it looks at the front. So again, it's those silly things of no clutter on the front. Some people will pile up a load of rubbish that they've been meaning to take to the dump for the last sort of 6 weeks. The grass isn't cut. Okay, it might be a wet day, but there is enough time to you're going to be selling your property to get the grass cut. It's those silly little things. All the cars will piled up on the front of the house. I always say again to people, we've got a viewing. If they've got 2 or 3 cars, get them off the drive so they can see how there's the argument of, well, they can see how many cars fit on the drive if they're left on there. But there's also that argument of it's cluttered in with cars and you're squeezing through to get to the front door. It's just not a good look. It's that's really what curb appeal is. That drive up to the property and you're already going, cool, that looks nice. That it's clinical, it's clear, it's not full of it's when people are thinking of before, again, you go in and putting their property on the market, they might say to you, well, we want to do stuff to the front first, what should we do? And I always say to somebody, keep it clear, clean and basic, with don't overcomplicate the front, because you just want it when people come up and they when they're driving up to it, it just looks clinical. That's really what the curb appeal is.
Okay, thank you for that. Just thinking about paperwork, is there never a requirement to fill out questionnaires? Do you have to have certain documentation available before you sell your property? What sort of things are you expected to gather together now in order to get your property on the market?
In terms of it going on to the market, there isn't too much that an agent needs. An agent will always ask questions about a property, especially if it's a leasehold property, so a flat that you're selling. The common questions are, is it leasehold or share of freehold? If it's leasehold, how many years are left on the lease? What's the service charge? What's the ground rent? Those sorts of questions are asked up front, because anybody looking to buy a property, that always the questions they ask. And it's I suppose a bit of an embarrassment if you're standing trying to sell a property and someone asks you those basic questions that you've had with leasehold, of someone saying, well, what's the service charge? And the agent's going, I don't actually know. So those sorts of questions we ask for, up front, so we know that, and we would tell our staff all of those answers, so they know what, when they're going out to viewings, they're the answers to those sort of questions that are bound to come up. But in terms of really paperwork, there isn't really too much. There's, once a property's sold, the seller has then their seller's questionnaire, which is a bit like a book. It's quite in depth of going through lots of different things to do with their property, itemizing what they're leaving, what they're not leaving, and those types of things. But the initial putting a property onto the market, bar really with us, with our agency agreement, our contract that they sign, getting their ID for money laundering purposes, in terms of paperwork, there isn't really too much they need to gather together. There is the energy performance certificate they need. But again, with that, that's not really paperwork as such.
Okay, is that something that you guys do, or how do you get a performance certificate?
Yeah, so we have a chat that we use. Most agents will have their own sort of energy assessor guy that they work with. They don't work for the company, but it's someone that we use to, as an external company that we then use to get that sorted. They're normally about £60 for having an EPC, and they last you 10 years. They are a really good, tool to have for your property now. When they first came out, it was another thing where, vendors think it's another cost that, to have to sell, but they are very good. They're an in-depth, bit of information that will tell you how energy efficient your house is and what recommendations there are to improve that, to save you money. It's given as a graph, an A to G graph, and the higher you are to A, the more energy efficient your property is. There is guidance now with rental properties. I think from memory, anything below an E rating, you can't let out because it's deemed as not energy efficient enough for someone to live in, I suppose. That's why they won't allow it. So that doesn't matter for sale purposes. It can be on any rating. If I'm honest with you, I can probably count on one hand in the 16 years I've been doing this of the amount of people that have been really interested in an energy performance certificate. I know it's a legal document you've got to have, but often buyers, they don't ask, oh, what's the energy rating on it? It's more something that a solicitor sort of, down the line, once the sale's going through, will say, oh, have you got a copy of the EPC we can have? But it's not really something, they've been around now since 2007. It's not really something that really a buyer thinks about, I don't think.
Okay, even though it has a bit of cost, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and it's got useful information on it. Like I say, it tells you, it gives you recommendations on what to do to make your house more energy efficient, whether that be changing your light bulbs to the energy efficiency light bulbs, adding more insulation in the roof and things like that. But often, yes, it's a document that's probably, I would say, very much overlooked by buyers.
Yeah, I'd be thinking, how much do I have to spend to get my rating up to an A or a B? That kind of thing.
Yeah. That's the only thing on there, actually, that it doesn't really give much info on. Well, you would need to spend this amount of money to get it to a different rating. It does tell you, it gives you estimates on your bills, what you could potentially save by changing and improving. But it doesn't actually give you the costs of what it would be to get it to a better rating.
Okay. So think about budgets now. How should sellers plan for budgeting when engaging the services of an estate agent? And what do those fees cover?
So there's a wide range of fees, I suppose, that you could, depending on what type of service you're wanting. There's agents out there that are the online agents that will charge you anything from £99. There's agents out there that will charge you best part of 2.5% for selling your property. What you get from a £99 agent to what you're going to get from a 2.5% agent is going to be worlds different. There's the £99 agents are going to give you some advertising space, but you've got to do everything yourself. You've got to do your own pictures, your own write-up, conduct your own viewings, negotiate your own offer, and then progress your own sale, instruct your own solicitors, all that type of stuff. Whereas then you go the other end of the spectrum where you've got an agent that is going to charge you that bit more money, but you're going to get professional photography. You're going to get those 360 tours, videos, the floor plans. Some even will include that they'll pay for your EPC if you've not got one already. And then accompany all viewings. It's just a completely different service that you'll get. So it's difficult to say in terms of, it depends what a vendor has as their budget. But there are agents out there tailored for, I suppose, almost any budget there then.
Yeah. I guess it's down to how much work you're prepared to do as well, basically, as a seller.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
How confident you are in doing that work as well, I should think.
That's it. there's the purple bricks out there that will charge you two different fees. I think one's $8.99, and which is very much like the ones that are at the £99, where it's almost that you're just paying for advertising space. Then there's those, you can pay them a little bit more money, and then they'll maybe do a viewing service, so they'll do your viewings for you, but you've still got to book your own viewings in. You've still got to progress your own sale, agree your own sale, and that side of things. But yeah, it all depends, I suppose, on how confident a vendor wants to be, or whether they've got the time. There's that factor in, to factor in as well. Is it going to, in the long run, cost them more money by paying less for an agent, but they've got to do more, so they've got to compromise themselves and other things, maybe their work life and things like that, or do they want to pay that bit more and almost, hand the keys to the agent and say, it's up to you, I'll leave it to you to deal with.
Okay, so let's say we've have a buyer and a seller agreeing some terms. What sort of typical time periods are normal now for the exchange of contracts, and what does exchange of contracts mean?
Now, with the way the housing market is at the moment, with it being quite buoyant, timescales are actually at the moment taking a lot longer. Whereas normally, years gone by, you'd be looking at anything from 8 to 12 weeks. At the moment, you're looking at 16 to 18 weeks. There's so many transactions going through at the moment. There's still probably a lot of solicitors where they're trying to take advantage of the furlough. So they've got a lot of staff off to save money. So who they have got in their office at the moment have got extra work to do, taking on more caseloads. The stuff is taking longer. The searches, which is a part of the conveyancing side of things, normally 2-3 weeks they take to go through. They're 6 to 8 weeks at the moment. So the whole process is really, taking, I would say, a good 6 to 8 weeks longer than how it should be to get to exchange of contracts. But that's, once you get to that exchange of contracts, that is where then the solicitor has done all of their due diligence with searches, inquiries, the mortgage offers there. They've reported back to their buyer with all their findings, with a contract to say, look, if you're happy with all of that, sign that contract, pay over your 10% deposit, and then that's it, it's done. Then it's legally binding. So that's what your exchange of contracts is. That it's as good as done. Then there's normally then that point between exchange and completion. If you're buying with a mortgage, the solicitor's then got to draw down the money from the mortgage provider, which normally takes about 5 working days. So you tend to have, some will exchange contracts on a Friday, complete the following Friday. But if you're a cash buyer, you can do a simultaneous and do it all on the same day and exchange and complete there and then. But those are the timescales at the moment. Frustrating for us. We are having to wait a lot longer for it all to go through.
Okay, so let's assume everything goes through and you move into your new property. So what happens though if when you move in there's some problems, so some things you didn't expect to be there? Perhaps some particulars are different or contrary to the seller's description. What recourse does the buyer have?
With regards to that side of things, I've been in the fortunate position in the years I've been doing. I've not had anything like that. I've heard stories of, things, for example, have been advertised as double glazed throughout, and there's been one window that isn't double glazed, and they've moved into it, and there's been a lawsuit, and it's worked out that they've ended up having the whole place redone with all new, windows, and it's been the agent that's had to pay for it. But with regards to our details, whenever we put a property onto the market, we get a set of particulars drawn up. The set of particulars are then sent to the vendor and are signed off by them that they're happy that the details we've provided are true, reflection of their property. We get them to read through, because there's certain agents that will just put the room measurement, but then there's agents like ourselves where we will do a room measurement, but we'll also talk about each room. We'll paint a picture of the room from reading it. So as an example, double glazed window to front aspect, wall-mounted radiator, built-in wardrobes, that type of thing. So we have to make sure when we write those things, it's sent off and they're signed off by the owner that they've read through them. It is really to cover ourselves, because we don't want that where someone moves into somewhere and says, hold on a minute, on your particulars it says such and such, but actually it's not. So we're fortunate we haven't had that problem, but it can come up. But it's really from there, it's normally something that's dealt with through the solicitors. Often what will happen is there's certain things haven't been taken out of the property, rubbish, stuff like that, stuff that people don't necessarily want, odds and ends left in garages or bits and bobs left up in lofts that the vendors have thought, oh, I'll just leave that up there, they won't notice. You might get things like that, or the bins are full up but it's not got the right stuff in them, and the bin man's not going to take it because it's got in the garden rubbish there's loads of general and black sacks and things like that. Those sorts of things are quite common that come up. But in terms of more serious things like that, of what was written down isn't actually quite right, doesn't tend to really happen, because say most agents will get their vendors to sign off the details that that they are correct and as it should, as it actually is. It's those silly things of they've left 3 black sacks in the in the loft, and we but they're simple fixes. We ring the vendor, do you know you've left those black sacks up there? They'll always say, oh, I didn't realise they were up there. They know full well. And then it's a case they go and get them, and but that's really about it. Okay. Yeah, there's nothing ever too major.
Good. Just see if you can get your crystal ball out a little bit. What do you see or anticipate will be the main challenges for 2021 in the property market?
It is a tricky one. That is that I wish I had a crystal ball to see how the market is going to pan out. Again, there's talk that if they don't extend the stamp duty, then the market's going to completely crash and burn, and no one's going to sell. Prices are going to drop, and things like that. So there is that worrying concern that all us agents have at the moment as to what are they going to do, because that really has been a game changer for us over this last year. But it's a tricky one to really know what they're going to do, and how the market's is going to pan out. I'm hopeful that it's going to stay as we are, because it is a really good market, and we record sales for us, and I think most agents, and big pipelines and stuff like that. So I think for all of us, it's one of them. Long may it continue. So I can't really answer that as much as I'd love to know exactly how this is is going to pan out.
Have you got any exciting developments in the company?
I mean, we're redeveloping I said to you, we've just recently started doing since the pandemic, the professional photography, the 360 tours and floor plans. Well, that company are now going to be doing actual videos. So rather than the 360 tours where you sort of click on these little round circles between each room and it takes you through to different areas, there's going to be sort of videos made up. So that those are going to be now a new standard thing that we're going to have with all of our marketing. So they're going to be good to have. We are getting into auctions as well. That's another sort of string we're going to try and add. We're in with a company that deal with auctions, so we're going to try and see how we can develop that. And that's it really for us for this year. It's it's still it's going to be a funny year to play out really. So we've got to be a little bit careful on what we try and sort of expand into. Yeah. But sort of small steps really for us with especially with this year.
Absolutely. No, fully understood. Okay. Well, I think that's been a really good overview of what's happening and what changes have taken place, and perhaps for both buyers and sellers, things to consider going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
If a listener would like to contact yourself, talk to the company, where's the best way to find your details, etc.?
So they can find us on our website. So it's www.gssalesandlettings.com. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, so all the social media, they can find us there. Or just give us a call on 01323 701 702.
Fantastic. Well, that's really good. Thanks very much for your time. I know you're still in the office this late hour, so I'll let you pack up, put the alarm on, and pop the kettle on, I guess.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Daniel. Take care.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please subscribe and leave a positive review if you can spare a minute or two. If you would like to contact me, my email address is david@thereallifebuyer.co.uk, or find me at Real Life Buyer on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, where you're welcome to direct message me. I look forward to you joining me on future episodes. Take care, and remember, save money and buy smart.